All right then. So, hello and welcome everyone to our series of bi-weekly talks hosted by Game Studies India. For our sixth talk, I am pleased to say that we have with us this evening Zahra Rizvi, who would be delivering her talk titled Playing Dystopia, Searching for the Neganthropocene in Papers, Please and Orwell. Zahra is a PhD scholar at the Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia, India. She was recently MHRD Spark Fellow at the Department of Linguistics and Germanic, Slavic, African, and Asian Language Studies, Michigan State University, and works in the fields of cultural studies, utopia dystopia studies, and video game studies. Her research interests include popular culture, young adult participatory spaces, and geopolitical issues in and of cross platform media. So, without further ado, let us begin this talk. And over to you, Zara.
Thank you so much, Shovik, and good evening to everyone present here. Thank you so much for turning up. As Shovik is introduced, I'm Zahra, and I'm going to talk about playing dystopia, search for the Neganthropocene in Papers, Please, and Orwell. I would like to start off with a meme Brecht quote that I often use about dystopian games. In the dark times, will there also be gaming? Yes, there will also be gaming about the dark times. So usually this is the next place to start off because it also tells us about the intersections between popular culture, remake culture, and dystopia utopia studies. Let me start off by talking about 20th and 21st century childhoods and their relation to gaming. So in an introduction to game studies, Franz Mayra talks about how the 20th and 21st century childhood is increasingly affected by diminishing access to space and children's remaining in constant productive custody. Digital games in their single player and online multiplayer varieties provide intensity of experience and escape from adult regulation that can fulfill some of the same roles the physical space used to have for previous generations. There has been steadily, and even more so, over recent years, the understanding of the world closing in, of space being cordoned off and perimeters being reduced considerably. Games with their long history of empowering social play begin to offer some solace. And Maya talks a lot about MUDs, multi-user dungeons, dimensions, or domains, depending on who's using what terminology, and how an important part of their gameplay was communication, with players joining in and making character parties, and how these groups of player characters were an important emergent gameplay feature of the time, in the sense that multi-user games were often being played out as escapist fantasies of survival in the offline world. With the emergence of the popularity of social simulation video games, possibilities of utopian alternatives in the virtual or online world increased. These games usually range from The Sims, My Sims, Tomodachi. There's a bunch of them, often on similar premises, and of course, we know of Animal Crossing, that game of pandemic popularity. The idea is largely to create you a better you in a better world version and live a good life as the hero of your creation, whatever that means. Now, of course, most people here today are aware of some of the underlying problems of these games. In a loving article called The Capitalist Joys of Animal Crossing, Nolan Gray describes the world of Animal Crossing egalitarian capitalist utopia of homeowners and shopkeepers. In another article by Amelia Tate, some of the charges against Animal Crossing are listed, and how people have lamented that it is in fact a capitalist dystopia with a darkish underbelly, and the game's raccoon overlord Tom Nook has been nicknamed a capitalist crook. As there are a lot of issues with black markets being formed, and the game's unofficial answer to Amazon being Nookazon, and people selling their villages in millions and scams happening, hardened items being stolen, and so on. And I'm not even going into some of the neo-colonialist trajectory of AC Animal Crossing New Horizons. But Flat has a great beginner's guide to anti-colonialism in Animal Crossing New Horizons, where he says that foreigners discover islands, settling, exploiting their natural resources for profit, and acting as if there's nothing wrong with it all. Sound familiar? It's because the premise of Animal Crossing New Horizons is the age old study of colonialism. But we're not really concerned so much with social simulation video games today. That is a talk for another time. Today, we're going to be discussing what can be called as new explorations of other people's simulators, to use Lucas Pope's terminology. These are games that reveal that the physical shrinking of space can no longer be compensated by expansive gamescapes. These are serious, uncomfortable games characterized by a suffocating hypernearing of the experience of the dystopia. Colin Campbell calls this gaming's new frontier, where interestingly, there is a painful absence of power that games usually attributed to their players. While games, Campbell says, have traditionally endowed the player with a host of impressive fantasy powers, these games show how their creators cope with real life difficulties, often with a limited ability to effect change. In demonstrating specific challenges via game mechanics, they allow us to walk in other people's shoes. Developers are showing a deeper understanding that by connecting the player with the storyteller through actions as opposed to the anecdote, confession, or demonstration of more linear forms, they can convey strong feelings and empathy in unique. Papers, Please, a dystopian document thriller, is a 2013 puzzle simulation video game by Lucas Pope. The game places the player at a migration checkpoint of a fictional dystopian Eastern Bloc like country as an immigration officer. The game starts when you, a person living in the country of Azotska, with your family, are drawn in a labor lottery that places you in the Ministry of Admission at the Greston border checkpoint. Here you live a very disembodied existence in a small cabin of sorts, where you have access to various documents on a table and the wall opposite the checkpoint window, as you can see on the visual on the screen. So there is a bird's view of a small piece of land that shows an endless line of ant-like figures of people waiting outside your booth and the handful of guards on either side of the border. This view doesn't change throughout the game, except for the event in which there is a performance of violence, which brings with it a conversion of the gaze, so often seen as in the development of dystopian protagonists, but a part of the articulation of the Neganthropocene as Stiegler outlines in his conceptualization of the term. I'm going to take a very short digression to talk about the Neganthropocene. The Neganthropocene is a term formulated by Bernard Stiegler as an answer to the debt and banality of the Anthropocene, as he calls it. I'm reading off the slide. So the urgent question today is not how we got into the Anthropocene. It's a bit late to worry about that, but how we might get out of it again, with life living and a world worth living in. Stiegler's The Neganthropocene starts to think the way to a future beyond our current impasses and dilemmas, says Shaviro. Stiegler offers a unique series of tactics to disrupt and short circuit the entropic ubiquity of the Anthropocene. The Neganthropocene is a jubilant escape route, a will to transformative and politically accountable chaos that remaps agency, power, and senior capitalism, says McCormack. So I just want you to keep this term in mind and what it implies in the context of the games that we're looking at today. So for most part of the game, Papers is situated in this very dead end banality of the Anthropocene that Stiegler tries to get out of. The visuals remain the same, lending the suffocate to the very close space the player can occupy, which continues to increase as the player progresses along the 31-day length of the game. The visuals are minimalist, bleak, despairing, and I quote the Gamescapes, the color palette of the game is warm and pale, saturated with grays and browns, and NPCs are muddy, impressionist figures built of splotch art. This dedication to inoffensive, subdued, and largely static visuals reflects the mess of bureaucratic exactitude seen in the player character's instructions, unquote. So visuals begins to get more and more frustrating and fearful as symbols, photos, documents, text begin to merge, and small differences slip under the radar as the flights. What seems to be on the surface, Gamsberg says, a design choice geared towards evocation of boredom actually manages to heighten the tension and difficulty at hand. The first few days of the game are pretty simple. We have a small set of rules with which we compare passports and required entry documents of the people who come to the booth. At this juncture, responsibilities of the player are to continue on this routine of unexcitable tasks, checking documents and stamping passports in a time-bound fashion, which rewards speed and punishes accuracy. The credits you earn mean a lot because of the family you have to support. You have to pay rent, feed your family, and unfortunately, your family is always cold and or sick. You're always worried whether you'll have enough to keep all of your family surviving. However, there is a danger to this stasis, which could lull you into metamorphosizing into an automation. And the game, when it calls to your empathy, fights against this automation of the player. Then the political situation begins to get grimmer, as the relations between Artsotska and the neighboring continue to remain strained. Accordingly, new and numerous rules begin to get added, and soon there isn't enough space on your small crowded desk to check the various documents to make sure you admit the correct people, not just for the safety of your country, but also to avoid the punishment citations that affect how much money you will bring home to your family. People begin to label just different points of information. They become a function of the data economy of our source card. So immigrants start to resemble the documents, passport cards, work permits, immigration forms, vaccination records, and so on that they have as you try to focus on quick reflexes in what seems like a never-ending repetitive sequence. This is around the time the game begins to play back. The mostly dialogueless characters now begin to offer you their stories rather than just their intention. A wife gets left behind while the husband is let through. A criminal has all the right paperwork, but a woman who will certainly die the next day without proper medical treatment doesn't. Who will you let through? These contradictions continue to pile up in more and more morally ambiguous scenarios. Sergio Walda on the screen is a border guard stationed near you, and this is another scenario which offers morally ambiguous choices to make. And he comes to you with the story of a beautiful girl that he met who's now going to come across the border, and he asks your help to just assist her across. Um, and Sergio has already some ties with the player character. We are from the same place, and we've actually saved his life once. So when you finally, as the player character, meet Elisa, however, not only do you not have all the required documents, but you also find out that she has lost her family, and Sergio is all that she has left. The girl with the controller states the dilemma of every player at this instant in a video essay on Papers, Please, when she says, "You should deny her. The game has taught you this. You have denied other people who don't have their proper paperwork without a second thought before. And if you let her pass to reunite with Sergio, it will negatively affect your own family at home that is barely scraping by. Do you put a stranger above your own family? Do you risk a citation and docked pay? Or is reuniting a woman with the only person she has left worth it? If you do let her pass, you see her and Sergio run to each other, as on the visual screen, and embrace each other. A sweet moment you get to witness as a citation also pops up at the bottom of your screen. Now, if you remember, citation is the punishment that you get. It's usually a docking of pay, but sometimes it gets waived. It's moments like these that change your strategy. This game is no longer just a test of the mind, but also of the heart. All of a sudden, the two citation warnings you get before your pay gets docked becomes less about you being able to make mistakes and more about strategically using them to make decisions you want to make. The case of ESIC, the secret organization that wants your help to take over Asoska to build a better country, is yet another case of this. And all the while, you are aware that time is ticking, and whatever choice you make that diverges from the rule you make them at the cost of you and your family's life. Not only does your personal situation get worse with relying, but also the people at the checkpoint continue to overload you with personal stories, steadily making it difficult for you to robotically follow orders. At the same time, the recurrence of ESIC and the dehumanizing rules of Asoska continuously make you rethink what's good for the people of this territory. Against the background of this movement limiting, choice limiting, empathy demanding gameplay, there is no accompanying music for the most part. A distorted, mechanical, retro robotic sound called the next person in line, and the player character's very limited actions are accompanied by a hollow rhythm of paper shuffling and stamp sounds, which are akin to being in some sort of a never ending horror, mimicking the dull, inhuman tasks of the player. The eerie silence and the repetitive predictability of sounds and visuals of the game are punctured with explosions, blood, alarm sounds, and gunshots. Interestingly, when you're off work, music returns to your ear. However, this music is usually the equally eerie Arthoscan and which has been described as spare, languid, lightly accompanied beat of one note moving one octave up and one octave down in martial determination ad infinitum. As your limited actions become sloppy and the paranoia of seeing the citation increase, you're forced to think about what could be a good ending, what could make you a hero. The orality of the game supplements and even foregrounds its frustration, but there are also a growing interest. There's a growing interest to continue and maneuver rules to different advantage. There are officially 20 possible endings for the game, and you have to replay various days to reach each and every possible ending. I'm going to show you some endings. Hopefully this works. Please let me know if you can't hear the music. Sorry, can you hear the music?
No, we can't hear the music. Um,
Or you can't
no, there's no music.
now?
No. Hmm.
You have to go on the top right corner, and there is a share music option there on the top right screen.
Yeah, now?
Yes, yes, it can be heard.
Yeah.
It can be heard.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so this is one of the endings. So as you can see, this is another ending, which is basically a sad ending. And at the moment, the death theme is playing. The death theme used to play for 17 out of 20 endings. And as you can see, it is characterized by a surprisingly upbeat tone, but has been compared to a played on state broadcast radio. If you listen to it throughout, however, the music does seem to drop in the middle as if to mourn the end of the inspector. Mourn because these endings are, of course, taken as sad endings. However, this mournfulness is short lived as the music picks up on the cheerful replaceability of the inspector, who, for the system, which can easily be replaced by someone else. Ross, Ross and Stiegler some of the work is similar to what we are seeing here in the way the wave of automation, which not only leads to widespread job destruction but also destructive uberization, challenges replaceability in the game. The eerie feeling that some horrible mistake has been made due to the broadcasting of the death theme is highlighted further by the simple yet haunting words on the screen, which you must have known, glory to Artsoska, once again underlining the fact that the system and the government doesn't really care if the player character, the inspector, has achieved an unfavorable end because the routine goes. In endings 18 to 22, a slightly different music plays. Yes, so this is ending 18, one of the good endings, and as you can see, this is the ending where you basically get to run away. This is the ending where every secret organization becomes sovereign role, and now a new Arsoska is born. Notice how it's a new Arsoska, which is automatically suspicious or discerning. And in the last one, Arsoska remains as it gets defeated, and the border checkpoint opens soon, and once again it's glory to Arsoska. So, but even though the victory theme sounds happy, let's go back to the. Hmm. So even though the victory theme which plays is a light-hearted song, the sounds sound really hollow in the context of the memory of all the bloodless violence the player character has wielded so far and to reach this end. If these endings can be called happy endings, it is because they do not signify the end of all possibility and social dreaming, but are nested in some form of hope for the player character as part of a larger community. These endings do also make clear the gravest problems of the Anthropocenic dystopia, that there is finally all about us evidence of a deterioration of political faith, belief, trust, hope, and will, and a correspondence of a desperate reactionary and xenophobic anti politics, all too willing to designate scapegoats and appeal at every opportunity to fear and stupidity. And now we come to Orwell, Keeping an Eye on You, which is also an episodic simulation game. It makes some of the concerns of Paper Please overt. Orwell takes place in a country called the Nation, led by a dystopian authoritarian government known as the Party. At the very start of the game, we know it's possible because of a safety bill passed by the party in 2012, which allows the government to spy on its citizens in the name of national security. As part of this bill, the Ministry of Security covert surveillance system called Orwell, which is operated by sourcing people from outside the nation, and you are one of them. As you can see from the first poster on the upper left, people that we spy on in Orwell are not seen as people, but as a network of the kinds of information that you get, and the visuals supplement this game design and gameplay. On the upper right corner, you'll see congratulations, you've been selected for all the test phase. They really tell you about how they are to have you and that you've been selected from millions, and it gives you a sense of power at the start. But let's see, Orwell presents the dystopia of techniques in a surprisingly mundane start of the game. The player is a CCTV camera looking at people in the Freedom Plaza, trying to identify suspects, even though at this moment there's nothing to suspect anyone of. And I've included Christopher Oz thumbnail for his Orwell Let's Play because it aptly just describes what the player character is at this moment, a CCTV camera. This convergence of the human player with the technological surveillance apparatus is telling, as it establishes the upcoming demands that will be made of this player, as well as the early reduction of the player, a small and replaceable part of the tech system in place in the nation. Orwell's approach to immersion in video games is mind boggling, in that by using a computer screen as the game's it puts the players in exactly the same position as the character they are playing, a person sitting at a computer browsing its contents. Designed as an investigative profile game, the gameplay consists of doing online research where the more information you get, the further you can go on in the game. At first, it seems that since we invest the power to upload information, and people are, of course, treated less as people but as pieces of information called data chunks, to use the game terms, we have quite some power. But as the game progresses, we realize sometimes we are being forced to upload information we wouldn't have otherwise. One of the examples of this is when our main character, Cassandra, talking to her partner, and she jokingly says, "I've stolen your credit card." We are supposed to put this information into Orwell, and Orwell automatically incriminates her as a thief, even though she was just joking about it. So the algorithmic automatized existence of the player here already begins to refer to a post-democratic world-less world that we are inhabiting. Sometimes the information we upload thinking it might help a character actually leaves them worse. And one of these is the image on the bottom left, where we try to show that Cassandra actually had an altercation with a policeman fence, but Orwell uses this to justify arresting her for assaulting a policeman. Daniel Marks, the game designer for Always, said that they designed the game in a way to directly make players feel like they were investigating the data while at the same time providing an unsettling feeling of giving some of it away to someone else without exactly knowing what the consequences for those persons would be. And that's exactly, we are drawn into complexity in state crimes, even if we don't want to. Throughout this, we are living disembodied, depersonalized lives where our only movement possible is dragging data chunks from main sources to the Orwell database. The actual movement performed by dragging and dropping the information object from document to profile, Daniel Marks says, they felt it was needed to further strengthen the sense of literally handing information over. Orwell makes obvious what is hidden and deals with mass surveillance and data harvesting as the main concerns of the player character. Soon you have at your disposal a large number of suspects with their own biases and contexts and websites, chat logs, email, bank accounts, medical records, and so on. And all this is available to us even though we are not even part of the nation that Orwell is spying on. With Orwell in place, nothing is private. There is considerable frustration in the fact that you can change very less of the game since it controls you as much as you play, trying to suffocate and confuse you with more and more information, great decisions, refusing to continue if you don't subscribe to its demands. However, as we approach the ending and are forced to make some really big decisions, we realize that throughout the game, there have been made that could have changed the trajectory and the outcome of the game. Orwell evokes a sense of consequence by the continuous commentary advisor who sees the uploaded data chunks and carries out actions. Not only does this give perspective and a dread of consequence, but it is also telling in the fact that though the player is drowned in information and playing to achieve more information knowledge wise, the player just might be in the dark most of the time. What says it's up to you to decide if a person's online outburst an in-person, in the moment rant, or is it hate speech? Are these students activists or are they inciting violence? The choices you make change the direction and conclusion of the game. And most of the time, you have to make moral, ethical decisions about mass surveillance, data harvesting, and personal privacy. What's also adds that the game makes us confront news, social media, government, or corporations and tries to ask how distinct are these institutions from each other. The delay in this realization is frustrating as one realizes that the mnemonic tech and devices of industrialized tertiary attention have immersed us, hijacked our attention, and seized control of our behavior algorithmically and telecratically. Also, we realize what is happening to the people of the nation who are fed sensational news. And unlike Papers, Please, one can't just really replay a day. One has to carry on despite there being no system of reward and punishment. As new information unfolds, previous information that you submitted to the system is seen in new light, but you can't undo wrongs. At this moment, we have to remember what Stiegler says about labor and employment in the efforts for the Neganthropocene. And he calls something of the concept of labor, which is meaningful intellectual participation from employment, dehumanizing banal work with the ultimate aim of eradicating employment altogether. And the tree of the game, if you try to get to one of the good endings, seems to be that. And with that, we come to the endings. Okay. So, if you are on the last day is the fifth day of the gameplay, you are presented with a few endings depending on how you've been playing the game. You can incriminate, which is the activist group. You can incriminate your superior, Delacroix, who is also the Minister of Security, or you can incriminate yourself and let the world know about Orwell. Or you can make a half-hearted attempt where you don't incriminate anyone and Orwell remains in power. Please give me a second while I play the finale gameplays.
New initiate's way of doing it?
Yeah, so this is the moment in the game where you find out that Orwell also has been
is
keeping
literally
information
just-
about you. Or Elinari's profile that Orwell already had. This moment, Elinari is really trying to
I really
incriminate
wanna do the method
her
that
superior
takes
so that Orwell is
the government
discontinued.
down.
But she's finding it really difficult to get to the information, and the
There
right
has to
now
be
is
a
to
version for
incriminate
that,
either
right?
thought or oneself.
Okay, I kind of gathered that.
Yeah, so she's totally
Okay.
most of the
think I
gamers
found
feel
it.
at this moment, because
End
the
a
easy way
career.
out is to just incriminate
Oh no, I've done
the
that one.
activist group instead of the people behind Orwell.
Bombings.
And now she comes to finding some information in the phone
Bonds and
of
bombings have been a real blessing. Hang on, why is that? Oh no, this is because this is what indicts her. Oh.
and you come to one of the endings of the game.
I got it!
I love her, and
After
I'm
Orwell
so happy
investigated
that she
finds
finally reached
incriminating
the ending
evidence
she wanted.
against her. Government announces immediate termination of Orwell. I did it. Nice. No evidence against Carrington.
Carrington is part of the student activist group.
Investigator wanted for arrest.
So
Oops.
the investigator is the player character, of course, so you are wanted for arrest
Extradition request out on me.
in this
Oops.
version of the ending. Yeah, this is where the game really ends for this
With the activist
ending.
the extradition request. It's presumed that the government will leave no stone unturned. Surveillance project known as Orwell.
You provide the last bit of information.
This is presumed to mark the end of the case known as the Bonton bombings.
That's about it for this ending. All right. So both Papers, Please and Orwell generated fan communities online that exist till date, discussing endings, small decisions of choice limiting levels that can make somewhere. The discussion board on which is the good ending for Orwell is another instance of the creation of space where dialogue and choices are no longer limited at game. And both of these games seem to invite us to think of the process rather than just the ending. And online forums still have people discussing what is a good ending in the light of events that happen. Uh, The discussion boards and forums reinvent gameplay through collective participation outside the game, and there is considerable amount of dialogue involving what could be a good. Both the games have generated fan-made endings too, that look into small changes which may change the intended ending of the game. The very basis of continuing to play again and again to reach a failing, to keep trying in the face of the dead end banality of the Anthropocene, is to take part in the exercise of social dreaming of the better outcome, a better future, and not to give in to them. The urgent question today is, as Stiegler says, not how we got into Anthropocene, but what do we do about it? And these games seem to think that. In discussing these endings and trying out new endings based on shared information of the communities of gamers in surviving in affinity spaces, hope of fruitfully surpassing that dystopia, of performatively and affirmatively contributing the necessity, as Ross and Stiegler say, of the transformation of us by making possible the adoption of an imagined but possible future, however improbable. These affinity spaces restore in us the power to make collective decision, which is stripped from the game due to the orienting of the player character towards audiences of dystopia rather than of citizens of the territory that they are looking in, especially in the case of Orwell, not even part of the nation that you're spying on. Filled with tutorials, tips, cheat code manuals, both of these games in the affinity space agency outside the game in these spaces by a game design where the literal end shouldn't end gameplay but instead invite replays, sharing of gameplay knowledge, and so on. This beautiful metaphor for conceptualizing the hopeful future that Stiegler theorizes when he says, what task then falls to the philosopher, who's so measure of an epoch in crisis, other than to critique those limits in their synergistic and antagonistic convergence, either to try and eliminate the path that turns the system towards the least destructive and most phase shift imaginable, or if it is too late for the catastrophe to be averted, to provide resources to those who, coming after the apocalypse, have no choice but new from the ashes, assuming there is someone and not just ashes. Both inside and outside the gameplay, these games, by virtue of being simultaneously empathic and dystopic, challenge players to think beyond limits, to answer tough questions of what power do we have over power, and foreground care as a viable political action is not just care in terms of being careful, but also of finding improbable courage in terms of other people's stories and to identify other people rather than just functions of a data economy. With this, I would like to end. Thank you so much for listening throughout the talk. And Shavik, I hand the mic to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that lovely talk, Sarah. Um, this is quite ironic. As I was listening to you, I was playing my own versions of Papers, Please on Zoom, trying to determine who to let in and who not to. While we all would like an open world of academic respect, we live in a different world. Talks are often disrupted and disrespects often distributed like Diwali sweets. A part of having online talks in pandemic, I'm afraid. There's a feature in the chat room where the host can ask a person to identify themselves. Somebody with the not at all suspicious name of Redmi Note 9 Pro immediately left when I asked them to identify themselves. Perhaps it was an AI wishing to be let in on a game studies talk. Others wrote to us on our Facebook page identifying themselves and asking to be let in. There is both a sense of power, I shall not deny, in protecting this little space that we have from disrespectful discourtesies, while anger is that one has to do that sort of gatekeeping to begin with. So, which leads me to the other sorts of gatekeeping, surveillance, and other things that we are subject to every moment of our lives now, while also playing a part in having people be subjected to it, right? And that's what I found to be most interesting when I was watching your talk, because um, I have never played these games previously, and I'm certainly very interested to go and check them out right now. And so, thank you for introducing me to these games, first of all, and for also for also giving such a relevant and timely talk. I do think of this as a most timely intervention into the topic that is raging our country presently, raging across our country right now, to show our papers, to identify ourselves as belonging to this particular nation, to this particular definition of Indianhood. Um, something I also wanted to ask you something. And for people who would wish to ask Sarah questions and who would wish to comment on the talk, please do write in the chat box, and I'll be reading those out for Sarah. So one thing and something which I wanted to ask you, Sarah, while I was listening to your talk, was that uh, this is obviously quite interesting, a particular take, and especially the very idea of the Neganthropocene and all that. But I and w- think of think of the fact. I was just wondering, w- what would you say will this game become if anybody tries to remake that in say 2021, right? Since the pandemic has also led to the world becoming a place, sort of a place where the idea of the universe has expanded into the idea of digital universe, right? So we are all the time trying to safeguard our own data, and we are also having certain controversies about the social media platforms right now. And so even some days ago, I was sort of trying to assure my family, who were uh, pretty much newly introduced to social media, that uh, the very idea of the fact that somebody could steal your data, somebody could implicate you certain things, is a reality, and that one has to live with this sort of a reality in today's world, right? So in this sort of a world, if these games are remade, what do you think could become the most important features of such games? That's what I wanted to ask you.
Interesting question, Shovik, and very timely too. I feel like you've already answered a part of your question when you were asking what kind of games would they be in 21. They would probably be Zoom में से rappers को भगाओ questions, right? But yes, I feel like like you said, you're playing on Papers, Please and Orwell right now when you're trying to just remove Zoom bombers, so as to speak, from hijacking a talk. But even other, first of all, you must keep in mind that these games are actually games that have come out in the past couple of years. Uh, the second edition of Orwell came out in 2018, so that's not too far away. Obviously, the pandemic wasn't there at that time, and who would have guessed? But some of the things that seemed improbable in, for example, Orwell, Ignorance and Strength, that's the chapter 2 of Orwell, are now seeming so everyday for the players that the players have begun to say that this can't be that scary after all, this is happening to me daily, right? And this is what we would feel too when we use various types of digital governance and platform capitalist tools, because that those have become a part of our lives. And as we have seen from recent cases, it's very difficult to just change your platform, right? We are all struggling with that, even as concerns and functions of data economy continue around us. And these are conversations that are happening every day as we speak. In terms of what would a game look like for a kind of pandemic popularity, I would mention Animal Crossing again. That is a beautiful evocation of what can happen if you have a well decorated dystopia. As long as you are able to go through whatever types of demands you've set for yourself, and if you're able to pass through this capitalist behavior, you're happy, and you call that a utopia, right? The other game of pandemic popularity, and I've talked about this before in Zamia, is according to me, I'm sure at least a few of us have played that before, and something about the game design that became so relevant in 2020 was the very idea of these workers who have mask like features. So that's very interesting, and also how the survival of everyone depends on everyone else in among us. These are just some of the things that are foregrounding care as a political action. And as I said, care takes an improbable and insurmountable amount of courage in these, to care not just about yourself but to those around you. But as Tigla says, this is how we can imagine a hopeful future, because thinking individually, thinking utopianically in an individual sense doesn't really work, because we are part of a huge network, and we have to think about this network if we are to think of a whole jubilant future. So I hope that's just some of the things that have come to my mind when I've thought about your question. No doubt you also have quite some parts to show us. So yeah, if you have, I would love to know too, or if anybody else.
Thank you. This is an extremely interesting response. And especially when I was thinking about this concept of the Neganthropocene, which you have stated in your presentation. Something which I was also thinking for example, people who are often asked to show their papers are climate refugees, right? Who sort of are dominating the headline right now and have been dominating the headline for a while quite justifiably. Right. And even now, as we go on to a very tumultuous world with no idea of what's probably going to happen to us, as the cities probably are going to be flooded. So I live in a particular city, Kolkata, which might not be in existence, which might be submerged in the next 50 years or so. Right. And such is the fate probably of many of our coastal cities all across the world. Right. And which sort of brings me to the issue that probably one important aspect of Papers, Please, if it might be remade even today, might be the fact of climate refugees, right? So the very issue of climate might become very important in such a world where Papers, Please are remade. So that's something obviously interesting to think about. And oh, we have a question, we have a comment over here in the chat box. So this is Shraddha Singh, who says that in your talk, you clearly pointed out that in spite of the dystopic nature of these games, there is a sense of hope at the end. So there is an overcoming of the end of man Anthropocene discourse here. Kudos to you. I certainly agree with that. Yes, there's a huge importance of hope in whatever the things that we have right now. So, Professor Mukherjee says that I wanted to take this back to the discussion of the Anthropocene and also the human-machine divide. Blade Runner, for example, is about keeping out the replicants or the non-humans by administering the Void Kampf test. Another kind of gatekeeping here. In Blade Runner, the non-humans are retired. Quite scary when one considers how what happens when even some humans may not be considered human enough. Right, right. That's definitely very important. And for anybody who is playing Cyberpunk for the next few months, for the previous few months, this is all the more important, right? And obviously for what's happening in this country right now. Guys, if any of you have any more questions, please do. Oh, yes. Okay, Nikhil is asking, would it be fair to say that through the empowerment of the player character in these games, through major differences in endings and so, they focus on the individual instead of a collective. They are limited in their subversion.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil. Um, I feel like there are some excellent comments in the chat box, and while I would love to respond, I'm also running out of time. So, Nikhil, if you won't mind, I will just take a minute to respond to Shraddha and Souvik, and then I'll come back to your question, which is a great one. Shraddha, thank you so much for the compliments, and truly, you all, Shraddha is the best person to talk to about the Anthropocene. So, yeah, exactly. What you're talking about is so timely. And I feel you have been doing a great amount of work in this direction too when you talk about dystopia and so on. And dystopia is such a wonderful way to about at least of possible answers of an Neganthropocene that we can imagine. And yes, it is quite scary, Souvik, when you what can happen to humans if we don't look at them as humans. And I feel both of the games try to put the player in that position too. So while you're making empathy, taking decisions, you are also becoming inhuman day by day as the days progress. And you lose your family members, you lose your identity, or it might even not be like in the case of Papers, Please, a citizen of the place that you were working so hard for. So these are games which bring to the fore a lot of these issues, even while it seems like it's just a monotonous routine that we are following. Coming back to Nikhil's question, be fair to say that though the empowerment of the player in these games may oh yeah, so they are limited in their subversion. Of course, when I first played Papers, Please, I suppose I on day 18 or something, and I was very upset about it. And and in Orwell especially, you feel this even more because there are times when the uses you to transfer a data chunk to the Orwell database that you would not have done otherwise. For example, Nina is a very good character for this. She's a single mother, and she seems to have a lot of tragedy in her life, and you want to root for her, but then suddenly you find a document which seems to incriminate her. And for the longest of time, I've seen players, including me, we try very hard not to shift this data chunk to the database, but to continue in the game. And the game is, after all, a mystery that you have to get the end. So you transfer that, and if you transfer it at the wrong moment, Nina loses her life. And that is the first time in the game that you realize that what you are in transferring information is a very serious case. And even though multiple endings are possible, at least 4 endings are possible in Orwell and 20 in Papers, Please, that has not stopped players and the fans from imagining more. As I said, fan endings are very popular. There are whole threads and discussion for that are dedicated to it. I'm sorry, I keep getting distracted by new messages that come in the chat. But yes, so the games are limiting inside the gameplay, as I said. Outside the gameplay, the spaces that have been cordoned off seem to open. And these affinity spaces, because by virtue of being usually online virtual, are spaces which seem to attract more and more players to discuss and think of more ways for this hopeful, caring subversion that we are to imagine through this talk. So I hope that answered your question, and I would love to know more. I feel like you have lots to say about this, and I'm very interested.
So I think there's a recent point about Watch Dogs Legion, where the idea is that you have a revolution, a ton of people, but they're all the same, right? And that undercuts the idea of a revolution being through a ton of people. I think the same thing about Papers, Please, where where the individual who is the player character somehow becomes the point of a revolution in a way that doesn't actually match up with the idea of a revolution, and which sort of undercuts it. Instead of asking yourself, how as a collective, how as a member of a much larger collective, can I subvert the current structure? It becomes, who is the singular person who is going to do the work?
Yes, thank you, Nikhil. I feel like you're really in the one of the right directions, at least, because these games have taught us, right, there can't be one, there has to be one of many right directions. And I feel collective decision being cordoned off is one of the central premises of the two games we've discussed today. I would suggest that you do try out Orwell's second chapter, which is Orwell Ignorance is Strength, which does a lot of what you were trying to warn us about. And the player character basically tries to engage in a lot of fake news to overturn elections and to overturn public favor. It's really interesting in how Orwell makes overt a lot of underlying tension of Papers, Please, and you would be really glad to know this, that it's an obvious intentional choice that the game designers and of Orwell did, because they were huge fans of Papers, Please, and they wanted to create something that would carry its legacy and its timeliness forward. So yeah, thanks, Nikhil. Should we go on to the rest of the comments, Shovik?
Yes, let me just go through the comments and find if there are any questions. There is a very interesting conversation happening in the chat
Hmm.
box, obviously. Um, we will probably
Yes,
not have time
that's
to do.
why I keep glancing there.
Yes, we will probably not have time to do justice to it. So let me just go through it to find out if there are any questions that has been put to you. Um, so I find that there have not been any questions as of yet. So guys, any of you who would want to ask Zara something, please feel free to switch on your mic and simply ask her. And uh, I think we'll just wait a bit to see if anybody has any further questions or comments, uh, or wants to simply say something to you regarding the talk.
Okay, I think I'll ask a very quick question. I mean, I have been commenting obviously profusely in the chat box, but I was wondering if there are any other games you have taken to games like Papers, Please, and Orwell, but can this thesis be applied to video video games, the AAA video games that we encounter, mainly the very dystopic games like Fallout and so on. Do you think that this thesis can also apply across kind of in game studies?
Yeah. So the Neganthropocene term is, of course, you can change it to call it anything. It's the concept behind it that really matters. And this is something that I've been developing for analyzing and studying dystopia for quite a while, because I feel dystopia, with the very paradoxical quality of carrying in it the possibility of utopia, the possibility of social dreaming, is very apt for a neganthropocenic analysis. So this holds as of now for a number of pop culture representations of dystopia. And I feel what dystopian video games do is that they try to make this connection, this network more obvious. For example, Papers has a movie adaptation already, and it refers to a lot of things that are both historical and contemporary. And this is of network which becomes very open to a neganthropocenic kind of understanding. And the very fact that Stiegler and lots of others have begun to do this, to are criticizing the dead end banality of Anthropocene, to not stop there but go on to discover these hopeful futures based upon the idea of care. I feel that's a revolutionary concept which we can certainly apply to various parts of whatever machine we want to look at. And this is a thesis which will develop the more it is criticized and analyzed, and whatever doesn't match up, it would actually help this thesis go forward. But that's, it's a very tough question, Shavik, which I totally knew you would ask. But yes, that's great. It's making me think lots. And I'm sure all the people here, especially the GSI people, have more to say than I would, seeing that I'm probably going in a tunnel vision of my own research. That's why, I'm very excited reading the chats and the comments and questions that come my way. Very exciting. Thanks.
So I do not think there are any further questions as I see over here. So thank you for that lovely talk, Sarah. Again, it has been a most interesting session. These games are certainly extremely relevant to the great question of today that is haunting the world. I refer to the immigration question, of course. It makes me proud to state that Game Studies India, as an initiative, cherishes these little interventions into cultural imaginations of these questions that rephrase things that we take for granted in so many ways. These talks are geared towards exactly that, and I am very happy to note that today's talk has done a wonderful job of using these games to talk to both an Indian and world reality of the question that I referred to a few seconds back. Shobhit Mukherjee has already posted the link to our YouTube channel in the chat box, and please keep an eye on it, people. This talk would be uploaded to the channel so that anybody who wishes to revisit this talk may easily do so. Thank you, Zara, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to bring to you many such exciting talks in the near future. Stay tuned. I think we can all end on that note. Thank you all, and bye.